Okay, today's scripture reading is Acts 10:30 through 35. Cornelius answered, 3 days ago I was in my house praying at this hour at 3 in the afternoon. Suddenly, a man in shining clothes stood before me and said, Cornelius, God has heard your prayer and remembered your gifts to the poor. Send to Joppa for Simon, who is called Peter. He is a guest in the home of Simon the tanner, who lives by the sea. So I sent for you immediately, and it was good of you to come. Now we are all here in the presence of God to listen to everything the Lord has commanded you to tell us. Then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Trish. Good morning again, church family.
Good morning.
We are back in Acts again this morning in the same chapter where we had preached, how long ago was that? Let's say a month ago. I'm probably off on that. But earlier in chapter 10, we got the vision from Peter, who basically had the vision about the dietary restrictions. And ultimately, he's like, why do you call some unclean when I have made it? That was the message that God had given to Peter. But today we have Cornelius telling about his vision to Peter. And when finally meet up, they sort of do this compare and contrast of the visions that the Lord had given both of them. And from there, the work of the Lord is done. Let me ask you this. And I realized when I asked this question earlier this morning, I might have stirred a few pots by accident. How many of you have ever heard this saying? If I told you once, I told you 1,000 times. Stan's giggling in the back there like, yep. Oh, what's really sad at Tilden, it was someone's anniversary tomorrow. I was like, uh-oh. I stirred the wrong pot. Anyways, now, and it doesn't have to be your spouse or anything, but it could have been from a parent. Josh, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. How many times has your mom told you 1,000 times about something, but you went ahead and did it, and you reaped the stupid reward?
How many times do I say, how many times have I told you? A lot.
Point proven. Oh, man. Me and my big mouth. Oh, it's kind of like I'll tell that story later on here. Do you remember the moment that it was said to you, or why it was said to you? I think guys have this problem in being told 1,000 times, and I'm not even going to look up because I know a lot of ladies are probably shaking their head yes. My mom always told me that I have selective hearing just like my dad. I just say I have a hard head. It's kind of like the time with my dad. My dad taught me, I drove like a little Chevy S10, little 4-cylinder. It was real tiny, but that thing was built like a tank. My dad always told me, never drive that truck through a water crossing. Well, the river had been up high, and I live close to a lake that's fed by the Illinois River. And it was it was receding and everything, but there were some water crossings. But I wanted to go down and check the road by the lakes because I live in a small town. What else am I going to do? So I drove down there. I was like, oh, there's a water crossing. It ain't that deep. Crossed just fine. I crossed 5 of them just fine. Get to the last one. I thought it was going to be even shallower because I'm going uphill and turning. I was dead wrong. And I opened the door and water was up to the running boards. Called everyone else to come pull me out. No one was home. I had to call Dad. Yeah, that was the first time I heard my dad use certain words. So I never did it again. Told you once, I told you 1,000 times. Well, I didn't listen apparently. But yet, repetition is crucial for recall, for understanding and the application. Just ask any student. I'm done picking on Josh. Bentley, I'm going to pick on you now. How many times has your mom told you to study for something, like a spelling test or something like that, but you thought you had it in the bag and you didn't need to study? That was what?
That was all year.
Oh, gee. Did you end up failing one of them tests?
One.
Okay, that's pretty good. Oh yeah, you told me that because you played a game of Scrabble with him. Well, that ruined that idea. Anyways, just ask any church leader how many times something has to be put in the bulletin to be printed, just so people will know and remember. How many of you had seen this movie called The Good Lie? Anyone seen that? It's based on a true story. I happened to see the trailer for this movie on YouTube, and I thought we might be able to show that here in movie night one night, because I think it would be a really good movie. It's about a group of siblings who are from the Sudan area who escaped the civil war at the time. I think it's based on a true story. They eventually make their way to the U.S. on visa, on like a refugee visa thing, where they eventually had to part ways. The sister goes to Boston for work, and the three boys go to Kansas City to work. In Kansas City, the boys have to rely on one another's strength and even the community that they create with amongst one another, including when one of the brothers falls to drugs. And all the while, all the brothers are working hard to create a life for themselves. The main character of the movie is working at a kind of like a 7-Eleven / grocery store kind of thing. I don't know how to describe it. But he's working to save money so he can go and be a doctor. And he eventually does become a doctor. They worked hard. The middle brother, he works at a convenience store. You know, where they don't sell gas, but they sell like gas station stuff. He ends up, it says he he quit, but I think he got fired. Because you know how grocery stores got to throw out the old food, right? He would take that food instead and give it to the homeless. And they didn't like that. They end up having to create a community amongst one another. And from that community, it overflowed into their surrounding community and influenced everyone. All the while, they are searching for a long-lost sibling or a friend of theirs back in Sudan. They end up finding him in Kenya. And all the brothers tried so hard to get him to the U.S. They tried so hard. But they couldn't give him a visa. So what does one of the brothers do? The one who became a doctor gave his own passport to his friend because they look a lot alike and they could pass. And there he was a blessing to his friend and got him out of that refugee camp. And I think to this day, that guy who stayed behind is still in that camp working as a doctor. The good lie. Creating a sense of community, of being blessings to one another. The movie basically shows community being built and identity being formed by the stories of their ancestors. Little ones hear their ancestral story over and over again and discover who they are. How many of you as teenagers heard your grandparents say the same story over and over again growing up, and each time you rolled your eyes? We're all guilty of it. But it wasn't until you were much older, I would say early to mid-20s, hopefully, where you finally realized what your grandparents were trying to teach you, what they were trying to get across to you. And by the time you realized it, you wish you would have paid more attention. Because see, we learn best by teaching others. We learn to tell our story when we find the words to express how God has been at work in our lives. The story itself becomes more real to us as we tell it and retell it and revise and retell it with the response of others. The story that we tell deepens itself within us and becomes more true. When some people take me to visits to other people's houses, I usually like being quiet and listening because, let's see, who can I pick? I need to pick on someone over here now. Boy, I had no idea who to pick on now. Sue, what? I heard someone. Sue, say Sharon wasn't feeling good. Knock on wood. I hope she doesn't get sick again. Say Sharon doesn't feel good, and you ask, hey, would you want to accompany me to go see Miss Sharon? Like, yeah, I will. But here's the thing. Miss Sharon, or no, Sue, you know way more about Sharon than I ever will being here. You know the history, you know the stories that you guys did as kids. You know everything. Some of the stories that you guys have, I will never be able to trigger. But yet, you guys know one another's stories. So for me to sit there and just listen to the stories, it's just a blessing in of itself. Because I hear the stories. I hear the depths of how you guys came to be who you are today. I was on a visit earlier this week, and the lady who took me to the visit, she asked, like, you ready to go, Pastor? I was like, no, because I like sitting here listening to the stories. Because I get to know you, both of you, more and more. I get to hear how you guys came to be. And for that, I am grateful for those experiences of being able to listen to your stories. Some people take that I'm not paying attention, but no, I'm paying attention all right. The author, Martha Grace Reese, in her book, Unbinding the Gospel, encouraged her readers in small groups to sit in silence for 2 minutes and ask God to bring to mind the story they are to tell. Each group member is given an uninterrupted period of time to share the story and, if applicable, the reason for telling it. At the end, the other members may respond. What opens as an exercise in listening and personal sharing turns into a practicum of evangelism. What barriers do we have towards doing evangelism? What if it just meant in telling the gospel that we just simply tell our story and nothing more of how we came to be and where we are today? That's living the gospel. Just as Peter and Cornelius did with one another, and sharing the visions that God had given them, and sharing the stories of how everything came to be with them two talking and fellowshipping and worshiping God together. Tell somebody else about what God is doing in your life and sharing the gospel. And telling your story, it inspires faith and hope in others. It draws you closer to the other person that you're telling it to. And you and the other individual stories can join in the old story of Jesus and his love. Kind of like that song. I love to tell the old story of Jesus. Amen.